Now on to the fights. Steve, I kind of went with that because you talk about, a great like Ken Buchanan and then the shit that we saw yesterday. And I'm like, well, seems only fair to start with the guy who is clearly a fucking great and et cetera, et cetera. Because there wasn't talent on display yesterday, Steve. It was just, we really missed the AJ fight. It went well over what I or the books predicted, going to decision there. I don't know, man. I thought the cards might have been a little wide, but it was just, what do you say? It just fucking was what it was.
Yeah, it is what it is, and it was what it was, as you would say, Matty. It was all right. I mean, I've called the thumbnail for today's podcast frankly functional, because I think that's the word that sprang to mind for me instantly. Functional. I mean, for the first few rounds, AJ's stance kind of reminded me a little bit like Frank Bruno, and I saw the boys in the chat earlier as we were starting saying the same. But as the fight went on, it became a very Klitschko-esque performance. A lot of hard, accurate jabs, combining the right hand in as well, a few uppercuts too. Not as many left hooks as Vlad would have thrown, obviously, but even in his mannerisms, he reminded me of Klitschko. As dominant as he was, whenever the opponent fired back, he was very quick to hold, very quick to grab, lean on. He sometimes looked a little ruffled and disorganised, and you felt that a couple of clean shots and he might suddenly be in trouble. But those punches never arrived, and at the end, we heard the scorecards read out and wondered what all the fuss was about. It was classic middle reign Klitschko material for me. And I love AJ's post-fight interviews, man. I mean, he's clearly gone off the rails a little bit recently, and he proceeds to give these kind of weird interviews, a bit of a wonky vibe. He's still vulnerable. He's a decent fighter with a punch. Who can find him will have a lot of success, because he lacks that confidence of the earlier Charles Martin kind of era. He'll never be the same fighter again. He's ascended to the mountain now and he's on the way back down again. Against the Jermaine Franklins of this world, it doesn't really matter. And Franklin played his part, I thought. He was a cross between Bermain Stiverne and Lawrence Claybay. He had nice fast hands through combinations at times. The jab was decent. He couldn't punch, though. He was too small. He was too short to consistently reach the target. He had a good chin, commendable stamina. He was just unable to cope with the holding as the rounds went by, and his ability to get back in the fight just diminished that seventh round onwards, I thought. Overall, quiet night at the office. AJ said himself afterwards, nobody will remember this fight in 15 years' time. Although I might alter that to nobody will remember this fight in 15 days' time.
And Steve, I guess what kind of disappointed me, if there was one thing when I started thinking a little bit harder about the combination, or excuse me, the pairing of Anthony Joshua and Derek James, is thinking, man, a good jab uppercut kind of oriented trainer, someone that kind of knows that. I'm like, yeah, that's actually a good pairing if you think about it. But at the end of the day, that uppercut was all but absent from Joshua's arsenal. I feel like what that one thing that really could have been, done well by this pairing, I didn't see it at all. Did you think about that, Steve?
The uppercut, I saw it from time to time. I thought
not like it could not here and there though. I mean, you got to.
Franklin's uppercut.
No, Joshua's.
I thought on the clinch a couple of times he threw 2 or 3 at a time, but not as often. It was more of a sporadic uppercut. But yeah, it was definitely there for him. But I just thought he was more intent on the whole Klitschko grabbing him, pushing his head down. Whether it was wise to pick a shorter man, I'm not sure. Maybe they could have had someone who would have matched AJ up eye line for eye line, but at the end of the day, at the moment, they're just trying to keep him rumbling along until he loses again. I think they're hyping up this fake beef rematch with Dillian White. But as for troubling the top guys, I mean, he's not going to beat Fury. I mean, everybody knows that. He's already lost twice to Usyk. Ruiz has beaten him. And Deontay Wilder would absolutely flatline him. So where's he really got to go? I think they're just trying to maneuver him along, try and get as much money as they can.
Yep.
Didn't really feel like a classic AJ night last night because we're used to these big events with the big arenas. But look, he got the job done against a decent enough guy. I thought Franklin played his part. He's definitely going to have a few paydays in and around world level. AJ motors on. And as I said before, it was just a functional performance. And maybe that's just what he needed.
Yeah. And he got to the finish line. I guess it kind of made me think of like a less passionate version of the way that he fought Ruiz in the rematch. But I don't know, Andy, your thoughts on this, and also just kind of the consideration. Does it seem like maybe they're trying to play this little marketing ploy with AJ where they're secretly going to try to, just have him as a high level domestic fighter while still trying to cast him as world level goods?
Well, this is the thing, you mentioned him in the breath of, potentially fighting Fury or I forget the other name they mentioned. It might have been Usyk or no, it was Wilder, sorry. And then they throw the obvious choice. They're going to go with Dillian White into the mix, don't they? So it's all bait and switch. They're going to talk up the chance of fighting Fury. Get a bit of airtime, get Joshua a wee bit extra free promotion, and then go away and fight Dillian White. I thought he looked lost there last night, to be fair. You said he looked less mean. I just thought he looked spaced out, to be fair. Fight was awful. I thought the referee was equally awful as well. There was times in that fight Josh was holding him behind the. You talk about that uppercut. Yeah, that's what he was doing. He was holding Franklin behind the head with the left hand and then right uppercutting him. That's illegal. Where was the referee to basically stop that? He never done that. He was more interested in getting on Franklin about the low blows and coming in with the head and that. Franklin, if he had a bit of power about him, I thought he could have really have put Joshua on a bit of kind of queer street. I thought maybe once, maybe he might have stunned him a wee bit early, maybe third or the fourth round with a right hand. But we've got to be real, if that was a Wilder right hand he was landing there last night, AJ's waking
Yeah,
up just running
you
about.
kind of switched levels on him and just scraped him across the chin with
Yeah,
it, I think. Yeah.
if that's Wilder catching with that right hand, mate, he's waking up running about right now. 24 hours later, it's to me, it's done. It's washed. For me, I think it's. All I'll say is that he had a good jab. Franklin was technically okay, definitely sound enough. Tried to ride a lot of the shots, tried to kind of bob and weave his way into distance. Certainly cut loose when he when he could at least. So I've got something in my throat here. And obviously, as the fight kind of like went past 8 and 9, I kind of felt that Josh was going to end up going distance and that. The combos looked terrible. Obviously, the holding, the grappling was awful. You could blame both for initiating that. You could say. But obviously, I would say that Josh was clearly the winner. Obviously, I just think he controlled the pace of the fight really, and Franklin didn't really let his hands enough go enough and really set the pace to make Joshua fight at a pace he's not comfortable with. And in the end, I think he just basically coasted to it. At this point, though, I agree with what Steve was saying. I just think with like a Fury or Wilder, and I'll even put Joyce into the conversation that as well. I wouldn't mind seeing those fights, but I would not. I would not be. I would confidently pick all three of those guys to beat Joshua and beat him by stoppage. They're talking. People were mentioning obviously they wouldn't mind seeing him a Parker or a White rematch. No, really, but I'm not really interested in that either. And Daniel Dubois, I just don't know what's happening with him. There's rumours that he's injured. There's rumours that he's no. I just think Dubois is a bit fragile, to be fair. I think he's made a bit of glass. He can pick up injuries, he can get stunned, he can get knocked out. I think Josh was maybe got the beating of him possibly, but I think for other three, it's a hard night for him. And obviously as well, the stuff after the fight and that it's that's the last couple of fights now. I think what I was more looking forward to last night actually after that situation was to actually get Joshua back on the mic than the actual fight itself, because I thought that would be a bit more entertaining actually, to be fair. But in the end, it was pretty poor. So
it was disappointing on a lot of levels, Andy.
It was.
I got nothing that I came for.
The whole card, man, was just awful. I mean, you had gaps in between it. You had fillers. You had Eddie in the ring talking things up for 10, 15 minutes. You had, Bellew.
You're going to be envious, Andy. I'm going to tell you how my viewing experience went for this. Well, maybe not that envious because I still saw all of AJ versus Franklin. So I flipped it on, and when I flipped it on, they're throwing in the towel for Rivers Wilson Bent. So I don't know what the fuck happened in the preceding 7 rounds of that fight. And then after that, they bring out Campbell Hatton, who gets a first-round body shot knockout. Well, nobody saw that coming, so I'm just kind of, waiting for the fights to start. So I just kind of curl up with a blanket on the couch, and I kind of doze off. And I wake up, and I see Gaffai drop a guy, and I'm like, oh, good for him. And I doze off. And I wake up again, and I see Michael Coffey doing all right, and then I see him just like block a few shots against the ropes, and the fight is stopped. And I say,
that woke you
well,
up.
That was fucking stupid. And I fell back asleep, and I woke up after the anthems and everything, right when they were announcing the fighters for AJ Franklin. So I caught Andy most of the pertinent moments of the evening without having to suffer through much of it at all.
Well, mate, that was the best. That was the best thing for you. You know what to say? Sleep's nature's great restorer. So that was the best thing that could have happened to you actually last night. Well, it was me and Steve. Well, I don't think Steve sat and suffered through all that garbage either. That's what I was saying. I mean, you were slagging me for some of the stuff I was watching there last night. The stuff that I was watching, which were main event stuff in other countries, were basically on par as to what was getting delivered on the undercard there last night. So you kind of fucking gave me a boost for that shit. Matty.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll continue giving you shit just because it's kind of a hobby at this point in time, or an addiction. Maybe I don't know. I don't know if it's more like golf or crack. One of those. It's like one of those. Steve, I didn't get to see much. Nutters were raging. Tell me about the stoppage in that Coffey fight. I think you said you saw at least that much.
Howard
Yeah,
Foster.
Ward. Yeah,
Howard
yeah.
Foster again. Fat Terry. No, they didn't take the cars, but don't worry. We've got Uncle Howard on hand.
Oh, and bear with me real quick, Steve. My
Yes.
apologies. I'd also like to before we do that, Kevin Sutherland tossing in $9.99 says, "Rest in peace, Ked. Keep punching, lads." Thanks, Kevin. We appreciate that and the kind words for Ken Buchanan as well. Also, Ricky Graville throwing in a $4.49 or $4.99. It might have been. It's been an expensive weekend for the Nutters, but we'll get to talking about that here in a few. But yeah, Steve, that I woke up momentarily. I'm like, well, that was stupid, and I fell back asleep. What was it as stupid as it appeared in my slumber stupor that I was in?
Yeah, well, I mean, polite Coffey wasn't in any kind of stupor, but this is a classic thing that's happening in the British rings. We've seen this before. If the home fighter puts a few shots together and the away guy doesn't throw back quick enough, or he's got his back against the ropes, he's going to get stopped. They have to know this now, unfortunately, and it was absolutely ridiculous stoppage. Coffey was doing okay. He was switching between southpaw and orthodox. He was throwing a few jabs here and there. He was in survival mode, but he was having a go, and he didn't look like he was in any way in trouble. And Wardley, he can clearly punch a little bit. He's an aggressive guy. I'd love to see what happens when someone takes him into deep waters down the stretch, because he seems to manage to get the stoppages. I know he did against Gorman the Dorman there a few weeks ago as well, whenever they fought. But Coffey, he's made his name as a kind of gatekeeper type. He had those 2 losses to Johnny Rice. He's not the greatest in the world, so it was a nice name to get on the Wardley resume, but the stoppage was absolute bullshit, man. Howard Foster saw the shots coming in, jumped straight in. Coffey wasn't happy about it, and I don't know what you can do about it, because they're on about, we got to err on the side of safety. We've had this conversation before, but in this particular instance, no one was going to get hurt, apart from Campbell Hatton's opponent. So yeah, he lives to fight another day, Coffey, but that's another loss on his record now. Bullshit stoppage, man. Howard Foster jumping in. It doesn't surprise me, Matty.
So, Oz, I know you wanted to get a piece in on
Ozzy
Joshua, and we'll also let Rob touch on that as well. And then I want to get to the top rank undercard, because there's actually some really good fights on that. Amidst all this bullshit, there was good fights, and I might have been the only one that saw them. What a sad
Big Daddy Bunce coming to the saviour of everybody in the arena, by the way, and Carol Froch for holding his anger in, because if he got involved, he'd put bodies everywhere, by the way.
No, I know it was. I mean, that was just mad what happened at the end. And Anthony, who always wants a quiet life, was there again ringside. This is a DAZN broadcaster attempting to scrap with the corner of Jermaine Franklin. So very professional, but we'd expect nothing less from Anthony Value, of course. But we can come on to that later.
Leave him alone, man. He wants to be left alone. Leave him
alone. Exactly, yeah. He does. He wants to be left alone. And then, he's always said, if you want a conversation with him, you'll find him ringside at boxing events. He said that on a video to us. But,
he turns up pretty quick as well. He fucking runs.
Exactly. But no, I thought the performance last night from Joshua, I've been quite critical of it, actually. And I thought he was quite ponderous. He looked gun shy. I didn't catch what you lads said before coming on, so I may well repeat what you've already said, but I thought it was a disappointing display. I thought he had a chance to make a real statement against, I think a lot of people are giving Franklin credit, he's okay, he's useful, but he's by no means great. He's just a bit awkward. I thought he beat Dillian White, but, it was quite close. White is shot as well. And, for last night, I thought a lot of his work was ignored, in all honesty, by the commentary. I thought they were garbage. I thought Costello was poor, and I thought Andy Lee was poor as well. I'll come on to that, from the undercard perspective, but mainly in the Wardley fight. But I thought, overall, from Joshua, I thought he is just, that performance last night, as, people will be queuing up to fight him, no problem. People are not, he does not have that, killer instinct anymore that he used to have. And I was thinking, personally, when did he really start to, fear it? And I relate back to the Vladimir Klitschko fight when he was dropped heavy. And since then, he just didn't like, basically he doesn't want to get punched. Can maybe look at the Ruiz one as well, where he timed him with that big left hook. But he has lost the instinct. And at times I thought he was boxing like he just didn't want to be there. You looked at his facial expressions. He ultimately, from a confidence perspective, had one of the worst starts because he got a busted nose off a bit, just a short right hand. And, it just, not saying, it was a disastrous time for him, but again, some performances, whilst you get the win, actually attract more criticism. And I felt last night's was that. He is a shadow of what he was when he used to be that big bully, going out, imposing his size and him throwing shots. And I thought at times he did put his shots together and he did cause problems and he looked more of his old self. But it was very few times that we saw it in the 12 rounds. I didn't think Franklin ever had the power to really worry him. And I think, if he was to come up against a bigger puncher, that's when I think he could potentially, get knocked out again. I just didn't think Franklin, even when he put his shots together, yes, he did land some good ones, but Joshua was never really hurt or really buzzed. I thought it was interesting that, he's come out today and said he's going to be boxing again in 12 weeks. I think the fight that makes sense the most for him next is the Dillian White rematch. I think he loses to Tyson Fury without a doubt. Likewise, Deontay Wilder. And I think Joe Joyce is absolute hell for him. He spoke about the Joyce fight in fight week. I'd love to see that. But I think Joyce stops him. I think he overwhelms him. I think he bullies him in there. And I just don't think Joshua would be able to set himself to land on Joyce.
I think it's the worst fight for him, actually, Oz, because you look like, Fury will probably just toy with him a little bit. Wilder will probably blast him, and getting blasted it's not necessarily harmful in the long term, depending on, right? What is harmful is taking a fucking 10, 11, 12 round beating off of a goddamn tank of a man. That's what's harmful.
I don't think it would go that far though, mate. I think it'd be earlier. I think Joyce had just. I thought last night. I thought it was interesting. He came in at career high, Joshua. Some people complimented, his gas tank. I didn't think he barely used it. I thought it was quite a slow fight, in all honesty. I'd like to compare the punches thrown in this, compared to the likes of when he boxed, for example, Takam, Alexander Povetkin, Usyk twice. Looking at that, because I don't think, I didn't look at it and think, oh yeah, he's shown something completely different. And his energy was there and his movement. I thought, like I say, it was just a very substandard performance. You're looking at it, I think, like realistically ranking him, amongst, is he a top heavyweight anymore? I think it's easy to be critical, but at the moment, I'd probably say no. Andy Ruiz would fancy that rematch. Again, Joshua is just, he is not, for me, he could walk away tomorrow. He's talking about the pot of gold with Tyson Fury. I think, there's not many fights that, I think they'll be, they'll be quite cautious. I don't see him, again, putting him in with a big, big hitter. I know Danny mentioned thinking that, mentioned about the Dillian White fight being a 50-50. I disagree with that, actually. I think, whilst Joshua is not what he was, Dillian White is absolutely trash. He is crap. And Franklin caused him fits at times. And I think Joshua just win that on a jab. I think it could go the distance. I don't think it, like I said, what he showed against White in that first fight was that bully boy, style, and the way he banged him out. I don't see it ending like that. But Dillian White is not very good at all. Let's have it right. Fury battered him, came back against Franklin. That was hardly, a good performance. So it's an interesting one, really interesting. Like I say, 12 weeks time, who they're going to match him with. I saw Otto Walling call him out. They're not going to go down that route. Saw Michael Hunter do it. You've got Billy Nelson cheerleading Martin Bacoli, that's saying he should box him as well. Look, I think any of the top heavyweights would be willing to jump in the ring with Anthony Joshua, but it is his first, fight with Derek James. I did see some nice things, but ultimately, I just think this guy is, for me, if I was telling him, I think mentally he's knackered, but I'd just be recapping his earlier fights and just showing him, obviously more to it, but just going back to basics of what he was good at. On the flip side, you can argue that actually looking back over his CV, which they like to bum over and say it's one of the best in boxing, actually, when he started to step up in the levels and, we saw him become more gun shy, he's not blitzed out these people, like we thought he will. Well, like he was showing earlier on. Look who he won his world title against. His opponents were quite well selected. And actually, when the levels have stepped up, he's not carried, that sort of power and that sort of instinct. Against Joe Parker, he wasn't particularly good. I thought the cards were disrespectful to Parker. So yeah, it's certainly an interesting one. I don't think he's got long left in the sport, in all honesty. I'm not saying that on age. I'm just saying that through A, how long does he want to box, and B, the sort of fighters. I think the next time he loses, he calls it quits, and it's a case of who's going to be the first, who will be the next person to beat him. We've already mentioned, 3 fighters already. We're not going to mention Usyk. He's done it twice. We're not going to see that fight again. And I think it'll just be a case of Tyson Fury, Joe Joyce, or Deontay Wilder. They're all massive fights. They're all big money fights. And I think it's just a case of who gets there first. I'd like to see them all, but I do agree that I'd love to see Joe Joyce get that moment. I'm not saying it'd be like a passing of the baton, because I think, Joshua's profile is absolutely huge. And I think, just beating Joshua would not propel Joyce into that similar stature. But I do think it would work wonders, particularly if he can do it in impressive fashion and knock him out with a big KO, Parker-esque, if you were to say.
Yeah, we'll see. I just hope that fair enough to Josh. He's had a good enough run as champion. I mean, it's what could have been. There's a lot of ifs, ands, and buts, and he's been very disappointing. But I hope he doesn't go out just against some chump. That would be a shame for Joshua to see it that way. Rob, what are your thoughts on the fight, real quick, and then we'll get on down the undercard a smidge.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to cover everything that everyone said, because we've been in the Nutters group chatting and everything, discussing it already. Look, I thought it was a very, very tentative performance from him. I thought he was extremely gun shy. I think he didn't want to be in there. I thought he fought scared against a guy who couldn't really punch, and that was very telling. And to be honest with you, I think the making of this fight, instead of going straight to Dillian White, tells you a lot about what's been going on behind the scenes with Joshua. Obviously, the 2 defeats to Usyk and the one against Ruiz have fucking completely crushed him. He's a shit. He always looks spooky when there's always looks like there's something spooky going on in the ring when he's in there. Last night, constantly looking at Derek James, he's even he was doing this with McCracken in the fights when he's in trouble as well. It's he's looking for help, what to do. So I think, so much has been made of the fact that he didn't have much of an amateur background and then was Olympic gold medalist and what he achieved in that. But I think in the pro ranks, when he's in deep waters, you see that there's a basic lack of fundamental boxing IQ and smarts that Fury has in abundance and the other fighters have in abundance that he just doesn't seem to have. I think he was getting by on his power. He was perfectly matched, as Ozzy said. Look, Eddie Hearn is a genius in a lot of ways. We give Eddie a lot of stick on here, deservedly most of the time. But Eddie saw the gap in the market. Fury was fat as fuck. He was after failing the drugs test. He dropped out of the Vlad rematch. He pushed the sanctioning bodies to fragment the title, and he picked up the trinket with Charles Martin. Defenses against Eric Molina and these kind of Dominic Brazil, these guys who have gone on to do jack shit in the sport and be basically cannon fodder for anybody on the come up. And they exploited the situation and took it to their advantage. Again, eventually, I suppose, building towards the mega fight with Tyson Fury or Deontay Wilder. all the while protecting their cash cow. Things haven't got to plan. They haven't got that big fight with Fury out of the way, and Usyk's thrown a spanner in the works. And to be honest with you, I said this before, I kind of fear for Joshua's mental state. I think there's so many people around him rinsing the last pound note out of him. I mean, Jesus Christ, Eddie Hearn's like Winston Churchill on Saturday trying to rally people to go and subscribe to his own, like, yeah, the Boxing Nation holds its breath, and Britain and all this shit, like, and really, like, they're...
How many of those 300 to 400,000 new subscribers actually switched off there last night?
Well, I tell you, you'd be disappointed if that's the fucking... I mean, look, a guy 6'6" and he won't punch through the target. Like, the shit that he's doing wrong now and last night, he's been doing wrong for his whole career. And I suppose that was the catalyst for the likes of Boxing Asylum and the other kind of hardcores who sport to kind of question the fucking Sky Sports narrative and the Eddie Hearn narrative of this guy being the second coming of Muhammad Ali. I mean, the way they used to market him, bringing him out in the white robe and the fucking stay humble and this, that, and the third. And it was just all a big, massive marketing machine. And the guy is feeling the pressure of that, along with the fact that he's possibly not that good. Like, it's the stuff that he's doing wrong. Like, he's 6'6". He's pawing with the fucking jab against a fella smaller than him, 2 stone lighter than him. Pawing with it, throwing it out tentatively. Like, get behind the fucking jab. You're a monster. Go and put it on this guy. Walk him down. That guy wouldn't win a fucking round off any top heavyweight. I don't give a shit. You know, he gave a good account of himself and all. And he hung in there, and he didn't fucking let Joshua bully him. And he answered back. And yeah, the cards were a disgrace, and the ref was a disgrace, and the commentary was a disgrace. But let's have it right. Like, fucking Franklin wouldn't win a round off Tyson Fury or Deontay Wilder, and Deontay Wilder would absolutely evaporate him. Joe Joyce would beat him into submission. And AJ, I'm not saying he struggled with him, but he struggled to look good against him. And, you know, it's the unwillingness from him to exchange and get on top of a guy who's fucking 2 fucking stone lighter than him, smaller than him, like, not fought at championship level. And, you know, I don't know. I think there's just glaringly, like, he's going back in straight lines again. He drops his hand going back. Like, honestly, there's so much shit. And the coaches that he brings in here, like, they're bringing in Robert Garcia for one fight, and Garcia can't get to do what he wants with him. Then Derek James is in, and it seems like, again, he's going dull at him at certain stages in the fight, that he's not following instructions. So I think he's got a lot of pressure on his shoulders. I think mentally he's broken. And I think there's too many people earning a pound note out of him to actually fucking... What he probably needed was a break away from boxing, like, rather than go straight back into a rematch with Usyk, and now he's back out again in 12 weeks. I just don't think he was ever as good as they made him out to be, and now I feel like he's probably paying the price for that later down the line. Like.